What's going on, my fellow Jedi and Padawans? Welcome back to another Jedi gaming video. Thank you guys so much for coming back to the channel, and if you guys are new, welcome. Today on this fine Saturday, we're gonna bring you a Titan PvP build that I have been using and loving as of late, utilizing the exotic gauntlets, no backup plans, taking in those shotguns, getting our void overshields, just absolutely annihilating guardians. This thing is good in 6s, in 3s, whatever you may be going into, so we'll go over everything with some choices of weapons as well. Instead of just one set, we got a bunch. Now, I know PvP is a little different than my normal videos for PvE, but I do love this, and it plays, like I said, well in everything from 6s to trials to survival, so absolutely give this thing a shot. Starting out with our subclass here, we're going to be running a bubble with Ward of Dawn just because of how everything is played with capture the zones, stuff like that. Feel like this is the best option. Plus, it's absolutely wonderful to pop this on another bubble on a well and absolutely surprise them. So definitely going with this unless you want all those defeats. You could go Sentinel Shield, but I personally love Ward of Dawn. Now we're going with Towering Barricade, Strafe Lift, and Shield Bash, in my opinion, is the best for our 3 abilities here. Now for me, I love using suppressor grenades, taking guardians out of their super. They are definitely not expecting these to come out inside of the PvP realm, so I love throwing these on, and it plays into our fragments and aspects. So starting off right here for our aspects, they have offensive bulwark. Now this pairs perfectly, so while we have an overshield or inside of our bubble, our grenade charges faster, and we have increased melee range and damage. Melee final blows extend that overshield. So this right here, with this build and the exotic no backup plans, we're able to get an overshield very often, so having that increased melee range and damage is super clutch for defeating guardians, because they definitely don't expect a one-shot melee basically. Now pairing that with Bastion makes it very synergetic, because when we cast our super or throw down our barricade, we give that void overshield to ourselves and nearby allies, so it pairs well with giving us that proccing of the increased melee range and damage of offensive bulwark, and we get to keep ourselves and our fellow guardians alive with Bastion and that overshield. Now, first off, for our fragments, we're going with Echo of Persistence, so that overshield that we're granting ourselves via the defeats with shotguns and our exotic no backup plans, or just in general with Bastion giving ourselves that overshield with our barrier, last a while longer with this fragment. Now to combat that, we're also going with Echo of Leeching, so when we have offensive bulwark procced, we get that nice increase to melee range and damage. We get those defeats, gives us health back immediately to us and nearby allies, so very clutch, keeping you alive in those multiple guardian fights, not just 1v1s. So this thing very clutch in my opinion, even though it does be more of a PvE thing, but when you're getting this to proc inside of the Crucible, very nice. And last but not least, we're going with Echo of Domineering. So after suppressing a target, you gain increased mobility for a short duration, and it equips your reloads from reserves. So all of your weapons that you have stored get reloaded, and that suppression comes in handy with our Shield Bash when we're using it, as well as those suppressor grenades. So we're able to get Echo of Domineering to proc decently easy with this build. Next off, we're going to go over our armor set and mods that we have on, because we have a couple different options for shotguns and pulse rifles for our weapons. I want to go over our armor and mods first, and then go over our weapons. It's a little backwards from what I usually do. But starting out with our helmet here, we're going to have shotgun and pulse rifle targeting. That's just because with this build, utilizing shotguns the majority of the time, plus with the meta, having some good pulse rifles to back it up with that targeting keeps you safe from all walks of the fight, from deep range all the way up close with those shotguns. Now moving on to the centerpiece of this PvP build, no backup plans exotic gauntlets for our Titan here with the Force Multiplier exotic perk. When we have that full void melee, shotgun final blows grant us void overshield. It does consume our melee, but when we get shotgun final blows, it also gives us melee energy back. So nice little bit of synergy for using that to get an offensive bulwark to proc in that overshield. We can do some melee damage, get more shotgun defeats, and before you know it, especially with 100 strength on, we have our melee back, so we're able to get overshields and go into fights stacked up and juiced up like a Titan should be, with taking a lot more damage than normal because that overshield helps a lot. These backup plans also give us airborne effectiveness for shotguns, not that too often you're jumping around, especially with this build and Titan, not like a hunter, but definitely you can feel that little stickiness in the air when you're using slug shotguns, something like that. Now for our mods on this, we're going to use shotgun dexterity, so faster, ready, and stow for shotguns. This will just help us get those defeats and get that void overshield procced. We're also going with fastball just because I love fastball on my PvP builds. Definitely with suppressor as well. You can get some cheeky bounces around enemies on walls, and with fastball it just helps so much better. There is nobody really expecting a suppressor to come from the ceiling, nothing like that. Moving on to our chest piece here, we got unflinching pulse rifle, so we can at those distances take those 1v1s or even 2v1s with our pulse rifle and just laser people. If you are using something like I am here with chaperone or a slug shotgun, you could switch to unflinching shotgun as well, because it does fit in here and it only costs 2 energy, but I really don't think it's that necessary because most of the time you're close enough where flinch really isn't affecting it, but these slug shotguns, you can reach that distance where it could affect it, so it's totally a play style, but I totally choose 2 unflinching pulses over an unflinching shotgun. Now when we move on to our legs here, we got Orb of Restoration as well as High Energy Fire. So picking up Orbs of Power grant a small bit of energy to our ability with the least amount of energy. So if we just used our shotgun to get that overshield to proc and it takes away our melee, pick up a couple Orbs of Light from a well, a soup, or whatever it may be, we're gonna get our lowest ability back. And we're using High Energy Fire because if we're getting multiple shotgun defeats, we're gonna become charged with light. So this just gives us a nice little extra damage to that weapon for getting more defeats inside of the Crucible, especially something like that pulse rifle with this and kill clip, absolutely nasty. Last but not least, we're using Outreach and Quick Charge, so we become charged with light by rapidly defeating with fusion rifles or shotguns, and we're using Outreach, so reduces melee cooldown when using our class ability. This helps us get back our melee so we can use it to proc, no backup plans, plus we get ever ready, so we get a increase plus 20 to handling for our shotguns with this charge with light as well, with that secondary perk ever ready, so we're able to just switch on and off of our shotguns super fast with this build. Now moving on to weapon choices that we could use with this build. For me, these are my shotguns that I have been using and loving with this build and just in general inside of the Crucible. So obviously the trusty dusty chaperone right here, I accidentally deleted it and put it into another weapon, so we're just getting back into it with getting those Crucible defeats, but it is one of my favorite weapons. Now for our legendary shotguns, we got the Wastelander 5M, Reese Walker from Iron Banner, as well as the Fractithesis Stasis shotgun. All of them have slide shot or slideways, definitely my favorite. This has that nice iron reach so we can get 90 range, but having opening shot on both of these, very clutch, and it feels very good, especially with the change to how shotgun reticles are. I personally like the precision frame with that kind of oval look instead of both of these are with the light frame. They got that diamond feel to it, so I think the consistency of Fractithesis is more. Now, if you're using pulse rifles in our primary slot, no time to explain, Peace of Mind, Revision 0, definitely my 3 go-tos for the Crucible. Absolutely can shred people with all 3 of these very easily. Now, when we move on to our energy slot, our 2 pulse rifles that I personally have loved using this season, BXR Battler with Perpetual and Kill Clip, and then also our seasonal weapon in Velis X. This thing absolutely dookies on kids, especially with that golden tricorn. We compare it with our Void, super nice. Now for our shotguns in this, we got our typical few. We got our Fellwinters as well as Found Verdict. Now I'm throwing a Matador in this mix too because of that precision frame and the way that oval shape in its reticle is, as well as Gonora Axe, so that slug frame that we have, kind of similar to Chaperone, just in the energy slot, comes from Iron Banner, and our exotic in Duality that gives us that hip fire pellets, and then when we aim down sights turns into a slug, so you can get the best of both worlds with this shotgun here. This is my go-to for when I'm running Crucible. This is kind of how my inventory looks, especially when I'm running this build and only using shotguns. I do love to snipe, so I usually have a sniper on, but when I'm going in feeling like a Titan, this is what I'm running. Heavy doesn't really matter, totally up to you guys. If you're using 2 primaries like that are legendary, go Galahorn. King of everything basically inside of Destiny. Love that weapon, but I also use my Blast Brute quite a bit inside of the Crucible. So this build, synergetically wonderful. No one's expecting you to get a shotgun defeat, get that Overshield proc, then you can just go tank another 2-3 Guardians, especially with offensive bulwark, giving you that increased melee range as well as that little bit of extra damage, just kind of perpetually giving you your melee back, giving you Overshield, and you can just absolutely unexpectedly defeat many Guardians inside the Crucible. Like I said, works good for 6s, 3s, survival, whatever you may be going into. So with it, I appreciate y'all. Hopefully this helped you guys out, get a little different build, especially for me, usually PvE, but love this PvP build for my Titan. So thank you guys again for that support. I'll catch y'all on the next one. Peace.